be live. So hello everyone, we'll be starting in just a sec, as normal. Save your questions to the end. We'll have a Q&A for all things Duo.
Yeah, I gotta open up the video.
What do you use to rebroadcast Skype?
I'm using XSplit and NDI streams.
Okay, I think I am pretty much ready to go here.
I might shut my video off to see if it improves your video quality on my end. You don't need to see me anyway, so that's fine.
That's sad, Zach.
It's okay.
Let's see what this hat looks like. There we go.
It hasn't. Okay. All right, I am ready to go when you guys are ready.
Okay, I am now recording.
Me too.
I'm recording.
All right, 3, 2, 1. Hey everybody, welcome to the Windows Central Podcast, episode 191 for August 14th, 2020. Hey everyone, Daniel Rubino here, joined with Zach Bowden and an exciting special guest. I haven't been able to talk yet today. We have Journey Dan, aka Daniel Bader. What a great name that is. Joining us from Android Central. And he's going to be talking about the single topic about this whole podcast, which I think will make a lot of people happy, which is Microsoft Surface Duo, which of course was officially announced this week, or rather we got information about its pricing and availability, both of which will disappoint a lot of people. But we'll also talk about a lot of the features and what we expect. And what I'm really looking forward to is hearing Bader's opinion, because obviously when you're listening to this podcast here, Zach and I have been, talking about a dual screen or foldable device from the Surface team for years now. And so our opinions of this, of course, is we're excited about it, right? We really want to try it. And this week has only sort of bolstered that. In fact, Zach was sort of like, before the announcement, it's like, I don't know if I'm going to get it now and this and that. And then, of course, I was like, yeah, sure. Okay, watch the video. And when it comes out, and sure enough, I actually have now pre-ordered one for Zach to send him to the UK. So that didn't last long. But our opinions on this are obviously, like I said, skewed. But, Bader's opinion here is going to be really interesting because he, works at Android Central, our sister site covering Android. And when it comes to Android phones, there is no shortage of amazing devices out there. In fact, that's always the selling point of Android, is the fact that if you want cutting edge hardware, the most radical new experimental stuff, you go to Android. I'm testing the Note 20 Ultra right now. I'm sure Bader is too. And OnePlus has their Nord out. There's the LG stuff with the Velvet, although I might still say no one buys LG phones. But then, of course, there's a Galaxy Fold 2 coming out. So there's no shortage here. So let's start off there. Daniel, Bader. Should I just call you Bader? I wouldn't call you Bader. That's what we call you.
Yeah, sure. Why not?
What were your thoughts first about the presentation? Because this is important. That we all in the press got to see this secret presentation that was 30 minutes long. It was Microsoft's Panos Panay, basically sharing the device and what it can do and the theory sort of behind it, as well as all the other creators and people who contributed to it, showing off its features. We watched it. I remember you said for a while, Panos, it felt like kind of like a QVC commercial. And I've heard that before, where Panos is sort of like a used car salesman, right? He's just very good at selling what he's talking about. But I'm curious, now that video is online, everybody can watch it. I'm curious, what were your thoughts about that, especially compared to, say, Samsung, only a few weeks ago?
Yeah, I think there's a clear divide between Samsung's strategy with its Unpacked event and Microsoft's with its much more casual live Surface Duo unveil. Clearly one was meant for public consumption from the beginning, right? The Unpacked event was live to everybody. This was a press briefing that then got uploaded to YouTube and is available now. But that tone was very different. What's interesting to me was just how confident Panos was about unveiling the product, right? He was like, look, we're laying all of our cards on the table here, and we just want you to evaluate it for what it is. And I really respect the crap out of that. I found it to be really refreshing. I found the whole conversational nature of the presentation to be really comforting to me, coming from this manic, disorganized, unpacked event that felt both pre-planned and canned, but also like really messy. Like it failed on so many levels that the bar was already really low, but Microsoft just jumped right over that bar. And I thought it was one of the best virtual presentations I'd ever seen.
Yeah, that's really interesting. One of the things I was really watching was both how the media reacted. So when all our announcement posts went up and people started talking about it on Twitter, there was definitely a disconnect between what the media has saw because we all got to watch that video. And now that video came out like 2 days later. And I really, really implore everybody listening to this podcast to go watch it. It's on YouTube, of course. It's on the front page of Windows Central. And the reason I say that is because the disconnect was, I was actually surprised. A lot of people in the media were actually pretty positive about Surface Duo. It's not saying it's perfect, that there isn't obviously drawbacks, and we'll talk about those later on. I think they're obvious, and we all agree upon them. But it seemed like what I was happy about was a lot of people in the press understood what was going on here, that this wasn't just a dual screen phone, that Microsoft really went excruciating detail and how this device is going to work, why it's a better experience, why some people are going to really appreciate working on dual screens. And that wasn't conveyed if all you saw was the render, a price tag, and a spec sheet. If that's all you saw, it was so easy to dismiss this as some kind of gimmick. What's the big deal? I'll just get a Samsung phone and call it a day. But I've noticed now that video is out. I had so many people on Twitter after I shared it. If you go read the comments at Windows Central, so many people watched that video and came back. And I literally had people go, I still don't get it. And then they're like, I just watched the video. Okay, now I'm kind of a believer. And so many people had this like pivot of like when they watch it. Now you can make the argument like, well, should you really need to watch a 30-minute video to understand technology? Maybe not, but when it comes to like a new device category, yeah, maybe. I don't know. I still bring up this every time. Smartphones, 2006. I had a Trio. I had a Windows mobile device. I was like one of the only people. I would go around and I get email on it to people. And they're like, who cares? Why do you want email on your phone? Just wait till you get home. What do you care about GPS and all this kind of stuff? No one got it. Now, of course, today, everybody has a smartphone. And so, I don't know. I just thought you're right. I think this was a very good presentation. There was a challenge there. Microsoft always does pretty good. But, Panos Panay is their best sort of salesman on this. Not because he's there like, it's because of the passion you mentioned, right? I mean, he truly believes in this. And this is arguably his most personal product in the sense that this was a passion project going back to 2015, according to some recent reporting. So this has been in gestation for a long time. Let's talk, I guess, a little bit about, moving on from the presentation device itself. Let's tackle the big thing, right? That everybody was upset about. And I knew no matter what the price was, and we're going to talk about the price, no matter what it was, people were going to be upset about it, right? Because I heard people going, if it's more than $800, it's garbage, DOA, which there was no world in which this thing was going to be $800, right? So but Bader, what did you think? $1,400 is definitely not cheap. But look, what do you think about that?
If this wasn't in the middle of a pandemic, I don't think anybody would have blinked about the price. For a first-generation product that is full of bespoke technology, right? This is stuff that Microsoft has built, purpose-built for the Duo. Right. It feels like it's like a bad precedent to set if you're releasing or unveiling a product that is over the price of what people consider to be the normal or the median of what a product in a particular category. But as you brought up, this isn't a foldable phone, right? So it's not a $2,000, $2,500 fold, and it's not a regular Android phone like a $899 OnePlus 8 Pro. It's very, very new. And I think Microsoft obviously has to make margin on this very low volume product. I keep saying phone, but I guess you'll talk about whether it is.
Yeah.
And I think it's a good happy medium. I think it makes sense at $1,400. I think that Microsoft understands it will limit its appeal, but it also means that the people buying it are purposefully going into it knowing that they are buying a first-gen, very expensive product, just like people did when they laughed at the iPhone for $700 back in 2007, or when the iPhone 10 or the Galaxy Note 9 jumped up to $1,000. A lot of people they basically just said that was nonsense. But at the same time, like this is the way that the industry is moving, and I think it makes sense.
Yeah, I always tell people, like, if you don't like the Surface Duo, if you don't like the pricing, 99% of the other phones out there will satisfy you. Like, it's kind of fine in a market that's so saturated with so many options to have something that doesn't necessarily have to appeal to everybody. And, for those curious, I just put up an article on Windows Central explaining this, like who Surface Duo is for. And I think it's a really good point you brought up with the pricing in terms of, you have your $800 devices, and then you have your $2,000 Galaxy Fold. And we're expecting, I wouldn't be surprised if Fold 2 is even more expensive because of 5G in there. And you get the $1,400 mark. That's right in between. You also brought up that good point about the people who are going to put down the $1,400 are probably true believers in this technology. They're at least going to be people who are really willing to give this a shot, who are a little bit more open-minded versus, mom and pops and stuff like that. In my article I wrote today, and we talked about this yesterday on the Android Central podcast, which I encourage everybody to go listen to, as we also do a very in-depth discussion there. All the hand-wringing about this isn't a mass consumer device. What will grandma think? Little Billy down the street has no use for dual screen. All that misses the point of what this device is supposed to do, which is start a conversation about what mobile technology can be. It doesn't mean it's for everybody, but Surface Duo 1 is going to be for the true believers, for the Surface fans. And I don't say that as like I'm just making this up. Panos Panay has said multiple times, we made this first and foremost for fans of Surface and Microsoft, and people who use Microsoft Surfaces. And if you happen to enjoy using Android apps too, that's who this is for. I think by the time they get to version 2 is going to fix a lot of the stuff that we'll talk about later in terms of specs and stuff. And then version 3 will probably be the one that actually does start to hit the critical mass. What I predict is going to happen is, you mentioned low volume. I think that's really important here. I think this is definitely a low volume device. They're not anticipating selling hundreds of thousands of these, which is why it's a US only market. They can control the narrative here and the production line just by releasing in the US. But what's going to happen is some people will buy it. We'll talk a lot about it. A lot of influencers will have it. A lot of people in media will have it, and true believers will have it. And there'll be a curiosity from everybody else who just will look at it from afar. And I bring up Tesla a lot because I remember 2012, the Model S came out, and then a couple of years later, the Model 3 was announced, and then it was going to be like, oh, in 2 years, you'll be able to buy this. It's going to be $35,000. And I just sat there. I kind of paid attention, but not really. I was like, okay, cool, electric cars. Sounds like an interesting idea. I like the look of it. Way too expensive. I can't afford that. Plus, there are no chargers around. 2019 came around. The price came down finally. The infrastructure was there. It was more mainstream. Now I own a Tesla. But if you go back to 2012, there was no way I was going to do that. And I feel like that's how all new technology is. And it's okay to say, I'm going to sit on the sideline for this one. In fact, I think that's a very rational decision that people are going to make here. But I really do predict by version 2, you're going to start to see more people buy into it. It's going to become more popular. And by version 3, this will be just another alternative for people to buy on the market.
Well, I think we're seeing the exact same happen with the Galaxy Fold, right? The first generation Galaxy Fold was an incredibly overpriced product for what it offered, although it did have more, I guess, features than the Surface Duo. It's also $600, $700 more expensive than the Surface Duo. And nobody bought the first Galaxy Fold. I was one of them, but again, that's the whole point. It's for enthusiasts and people who are buying into this future of devices. It's not for grandma or Billy down the street, as you mentioned. And with the Fold 2, loads of the issues that the Fold 1 had have been solved. We're going to see the exact same issue, the exact same thing with the Surface Duo. Duo 1 is testing out the form factor, as was Galaxy Fold. Duo 2 will fix many of the issues Duo 1 has, as is Galaxy Fold 2.
Yeah. Yeah, Fold is a really good example because a lot of people kind of like looked at that like with a side eye, like, I don't know. First of all, who's going to pay $2,000 for it? And it's just going to break in 3 months anyway. And it turns out both things were wrong. I don't think Fold sold a tremendous, again, it was a low volume product, but it made waves and the form factor has stuck around. And Fold 2 Fold 2 looks awesome, right? It's hard not to look at that and be like, wow, Samsung has made a lot of progress here. In just a short amount of time. But the pricing there, a lot of people say like, why would you get Surface Duo when you could get a Fold 2? I'm like, are you nuts? Like, it's at least $600 difference. And when you're talking about this amount of money, like $600 matters. If it didn't matter, right, then why not talk about $800 $800 phone and then it's only $600 difference, and my Surface earbuds just told me I have a low battery.
But not only that, not everybody wants a foldable screen. I think this is a really important distinction because a lot of people are comparing the Fold and the Duo as if the Duo isn't as good because it's not using a foldable screen, when in reality Microsoft deliberately went for dual screens. They were originally prototyping foldable screens as well, and ultimately decided to go for dual screens deliberately because they see an advantage over having the big screen. And I think I agree with them because I've been using a Galaxy Fold since December, since whenever it came out. And don't get me wrong, I love this thing. This thing is amazing, but I've decided I don't want a foldable Android tablet. It doesn't, the bigger screen doesn't provide too many benefits over just having a normal size phone screen. The benefit of the Duo is that it's two normal size phone screens so that you can just, your apps run in phone mode all the time. Whereas on the Galaxy Fold, if I open, say, Twitter, I'm using Twitter on the small screen on the outside, and if I open it out to the big screen, it's the same app, but just spread out a little bit. There's a lot more empty space because Twitter isn't an app that's designed for tablets. And that's the real shame with the Galaxy Fold. It's because Android isn't good on tablets. Duo doesn't have that problem. Duo's just a phone that has a second screen that can do other phone stuff. And I think that's the key difference here.
I also I think it's worth pointing out that when companies design phones, they reach a certain point where they have to reach design hold, where they have to stop development of the product from a hardware perspective and move on to sourcing, to integration, to software, to distribution, etc. And the reality is that Microsoft announced this in 2019, right? They announced this at the end of last year with the intention of releasing it X months later, right? We don't know how much later, but it's coming in September. It may have originally been intended for holiday season. So a full 12 months at some point they intended on announcing this early. So yeah, the specs are not even a high-end 2019 flagship. But that is not even the point, because Microsoft likely had to start sourcing final design for these custom components well before that, right? And that makes a big difference in how people are going to perceive this. Because if you are somebody like us in the core Android world who's a spec hound, who goes after the latest and greatest, who won't settle for anything but the best, then this is not the phone for you, because Microsoft deliberately stopped hardware development probably as early as July of 2019, knowing, I mean, Zach, you probably know far more about this than I do, but my guess is that Microsoft made a concerted effort to start integration far earlier with the Surface Duo than most phone makers do with their phones, because this is such a new form factor.
Yeah, when Microsoft decided to adopt Android, the key thing that they focused on there was trying to make Android as good as it could possibly be on this dual screen device, because we've seen dual screen Android phones and most of them aren't very good, and I'm including the LGs with that.
You're being very kind. They are straight up garbage.
Yeah, from a software perspective at least, they're really not great. And what Microsoft focused on a lot with the Duo is the software and the OS experience, integrating the hardware with the software as much as feasibly possible. And I think you can really see that in the presentation they did. Panel spends a lot of time just showing off how apps can span, how fluid the UI is, and how I wouldn't say not like Android it is, but how I don't know. It's hard to explain. It's not like other Androids, but it is also still Android. Microsoft describes it as the Microsoft you love with the Android you know. And I think that's a great way to explain it. The version of Android that ships on Surface Duo is still very much Android, but Microsoft has done tweaks and changes to it to make it flow on this device, unlike any other Android dual-screen device we've seen before.
It's also impressive that Microsoft was even willing to acknowledge on stage multiple times the close work that they did with Google, right? Like, this is a very new Microsoft. It's even unlike Samsung, who's always sort of reticent to acknowledge just how much they rely on Google for the things that make Samsung phones what they are. Microsoft is leaning into that collaboration. He brought up Hiroshi Lockheimer, who leads the Android team. Hiroshi tweeted a teaser about a day before the announcement, right? Like, this was intentional marketing between the two companies that is very novel in the space. And it speaks to the fact that Microsoft needs Google for this, and Google in turn needs Microsoft to push the design boundaries and, send upstream a lot of the advancements in dual screen Android support that are native in Android 11.
Yeah, it's a really good point. I mean, what Microsoft is doing here isn't all to benefit just themselves and their concept of Duo. In fact, it's the opposite. They're sharing all this stuff. They're putting the SDK out there. They're working with Google. And the anticipation here and what they want is for other companies to make kind of similar devices. They have it, the theory there for them is that they're still going to kind of do the best version of it because they've been working so hard on this for such a long time. But that doesn't mean, like, if Samsung want to come out with a device that was similar to this and use the same APIs and the SDK to do the same experience, Samsung could definitely pull this off and do their own spin on it. And then you get that competition and pricing and all that. I still think, though, of course, and, we talked about this, and Bader, you brought this up already with the hardware. It is all custom hardware in it. And I don't think people understand, like, the displays, companies don't make displays. It's like LG, it's Samsung, and then there may be another company out there, but there really aren't a lot of big makers out there. And just like the laptop space, they source these components and they try to not be as custom as they can. They want to have good features in them, but when you veer from the norm, that's where it gets expensive, which is why foldable displays are so expensive. They're not mass produced, they're hard to make. Well, the displays here are completely customized. They're basically the world's thinnest AMOLED. They also support inking, which is not trivial. Like, there's a reason why so many devices, including the Fold and Fold 2, do not support inking. The materials obviously don't allow it, or at least makes it, I would say, a challenge. It supports inking, it supports touch. Both displays talk to each other constantly. They stay in sync in terms of the color gamut and the how they're going to be for their color, basically. Also, when you're dragging across stuff across the screen, like, they had to make separate processors for everything. They had to make 2 separate batteries. They had to make sure that the batteries charged at the same time and discharge proportionally so as it doesn't make the batteries deplete over time. They had to split up the motherboard onto each side. They had to redesign, do their own custom antennas to make all this work. Of course, the hinge is like a marvel of engineering. The wiring that goes through the hinge, they said some of the wiring is thinner than a human hair. It's just like there is a... So, the reason I'm bringing this up, because one, that all drives up the price because almost all the components they're using is not mass produced. So they have to create factories and create the machines to make this stuff. And the volume is going to be a lot lower for it because they have to ensure that the quality is still there for doing this. They're also new at making this stuff. So it's not like they want to just go out like, yeah, we'll make, 100,000 of them.
Yeah.
Because they don't know how that's going to work.
And all of that in, I think Microsoft called it the world's thinnest smartphone or the world's thinnest mobile device because it's 4.8 millimeters thin, which together is 9.6 or 9.9 millimeters when closed. But that's not the point. 4.8 millimeters is the maximum amount of space any one component can have in that device. And that's a huge engineering problem Microsoft had to solve there, which probably explains things why explains why we have things such as only one camera sensor, and a small one at that, because they can't fit a big one in there. They did prototype internally versions of Duo with an external camera, with a camera bump and stuff, but they didn't go for it because for Gen 1 they wanted to focus on the form factor and the appearance of the product externally. I think we can all agree Surface Duo's external appearance is sublime. It's a very minimalist, clean-looking product. It looks very futuristic until you open it up and see all the bezels. But from the outside, it looks great. Some of those prototypes had camera bumps, and it took away from the aesthetic quite considerably. And you know what Panos is like, and Microsoft. The Surface products are supposed to look amazing rather than, be functional in a lot of cases.
Yeah, and you guys didn't get to see, but after that press event, they did actually Q&A with the media, and Panos talked a little bit more about the design, and it's 4.8 millimeters thin, and as Zach rightly points out, no component in that device can be thicker than 4.8 millimeters. And Panos was very adamant. He's like, no, it's 4.8, not 5 millimeters. Yeah. It says it's 4.8. Like, they had to, the way it's designed and the way it looks is 100% done on purpose. They set up these constraints about it being perfectly balanced, perfectly sized, and they weren't going to veer from that. So like one reason why it doesn't have 5G in it is because battery life on 5G devices tends to be worse. That may get fixed over time, but that's just a fact right now. And it's already so thin that they can't put in thicker batteries in it. So what was the option? Make battery life even worse, or redesign the chassis, delay it by another at least 8 months, I imagine, and make the device thicker and stray from your concept. Because and this is going to be crucial, go watch the video with Panos, and then hopefully, I believe, probably a week before it actually goes on sale, I wouldn't be surprised. You should be able to go into your Best Buy, see one on display, and go play with it yourself. When you see this device in person and get to pick it up and try it out from this, I guarantee you're going to have a new appreciation for the hardware they did. I had this experience. You've heard me talk about it multiple times on this podcast. When you first pick it up, you're just like, oh, this is different. This is not anything I've ever held before. It's super thin. It's very elegant. And all that is, it's the precision they put in there. And as Zach points out, it resulted in a lot of compromise, which they'll solve in version 2.
So regarding that compromise, we should probably list the specs for those who may not be aware. So if you've listened to this podcast before, you know most of this already. We sort of leaked it a while ago. Pat ourselves on the back. We were 98% right on most of the specs. We were off by a couple of things here and there, but for the most part we were pretty on the money. So it's a Snapdragon 855 processor with 6 gigs of RAM, 128 or 256 gigabytes of UFS 3.0 storage. It has an 11 megapixel camera with an f-stop of 2, I think it is. It has the 3,577 milliamp hour battery. That's split across 2 batteries. So I think one of them is 3462, and the other one, I guess, is whatever else that needs to be. Microsoft says it has all-day battery life. They haven't given us any exact numbers, I don't think. But it's a small battery for a device with 2 screens. I think everyone can agree. I don't think this is going to be an endurance champ by any means. But Microsoft says it should get you through a workday just fine, so we'll have to wait and see regarding that. Things it doesn't have. No NFC, no wireless charging, no 5G, as Dan mentioned. It's missing a lot of that stuff. It has only one camera sensor, 11 megapixels, as I mentioned. And we're expecting the camera to be fine. It's not going to be, it's not going to blow your socks off. It's not going to be competing with the Samsungs and the iPhones and the Pixels of the market. It's essentially a souped-up front-facing camera, which, paired with Microsoft's AI optimizations, may be okay. We don't really know what Microsoft is doing on the AI side, but they did mention it in the spec sheet and stuff, so it is there. But we'll have to wait and see what the camera's like, because they haven't given us any sample shots or anything yet. So we technically still don't really know how the camera is on this device.
I would venture to say the camera is about as low priority for Microsoft as adding NFC, right? Like, it's not something that the companies probably worry too much about for a first-gen product. That said, like, you have a Galaxy Fold. Mm-hmm. The cameras on those are not very good. Yeah. And, there are 4 of them. So, like, I just feel like this is not something that people are going to worry about when you buy. I'm going to throw this out to you guys. How many people do you think are going to buy this as a replacement to or a supplement for their current phone?
That's a good question.
Yeah, I don't. And Microsoft doesn't know that answer either. Like for them, this is as much an experiment. I think for some people, you will be able to replace this and make this as your own phone. That's how I'm going to try to review it. I'm going to just put my main SIM in there, and I'm just going to try to make it my main device. But for other people who may need other features, they may want to carry two around. I don't think that's that dramatically different from people who carry an iPhone and an iPad mini around, or an iPad or a Kindle even, right? So that will be interesting. I don't think Microsoft themselves know the answer to that until people get it and they see what the limitations are. Obviously, for a lot of people in our audience right now, I hear all the time, oh, no NFC, deal killer. Oh, I really need a good camera, deal killer. And that's fine. Like, I'm not here to convince people, give up NFC, or NFC is stupid. Why do you need that? Like, that's clearly not the case. What I am saying is the theory of Surface Duo, this idea of dual screens and ability to do more with that, have productivity, creativity, open up new doors, and have a new experience. That is the theory of the device. If that doesn't hold up, it doesn't matter if the camera's good or bad, if it is NFC or cheap, because no one's going to buy a $1,400 device where the core experience is flawed and doesn't work well and doesn't benefit you all, just because, as I wrote in the article, you can go to 7-Eleven and buy some Slim Jims without pulling your wallet out. Like, that's not a selling point. But what's cool about those things is technically they're easy to solve. They're very low-hanging fruit. Microsoft knows for V2 and V3, oh, okay, so we got to add Qi to this. We should probably add NFC to this. Let's try to do a better job with the camera. But once you have the foundation right for this phone, those things are kind of easy to sort of work on, knowing ahead of time where it's going to be. So I'm not really concerned about it. But if you are seeing this device and you're like, I'm going to set out version 1 because I need those things, that's totally fine. You don't really need to justify that to anybody. Like, that's a very rational position to take. Also understand, for some people, it doesn't matter. I've said numerous times, I never use NFC. I have it on my iPhone. I have it on my Apple Watch. I have it on my Samsung phone. I have it in my Fitbit. Never use it. Part of it's because where I live, it's just not prevalent. I also don't go to a ton of places that have it. I go to restaurants, they take my credit card still. They don't do NFC. But I get, for people who live in the city, especially people in Europe, it's a crucial thing, and that's fine. But not everybody has that same experience.
Yeah. I mean, elsewhere in the world, I think NFC is way more important to a lot of people. At least in London, here in the UK, NFC is everywhere. Most people pay for things using NFC on their phone. So that might also explain why it's US only, right? Because it is missing a lot of those features that other countries might be expecting more so than other things. In the US, NFC isn't as big of a deal. So this is US only for those who were unaware. Unfortunately, it's US only, and Microsoft isn't commenting on when it will be coming to other markets. I believe they have said it will eventually, but they've not given us a time frame for that. I'm hearing it might be a while. So if you're holding out for one of these, you're going to be waiting.
Because you know what's going to happen? They're gonna release it for Europe and UK. It'll have NFC.
Yeah, well, that would be an improvement, to be honest. But it's also like £1,500, so it's way more expensive. Right.
Yeah. So, I don't know. Vader, what do you think about the whole theory of dual screens and like kind of what you saw in the presentation in terms of like productivity and getting things done? We're both in an industry where it's not uncommon for us to have dual displays, both when we travel even, but at home especially. I'm curious what your thoughts about that. And do you see yourself even being able to sort of take advantage of that or see it as a bonus?
Yeah, I mean, look, I've been somebody who's a proponent of dual screen productivity on my laptop and I have my laptop to my left, and I use that as sort of like an offload. Like, if you think about a to-do list, right? Like, you have something that's always in front of you. And I have an ultra-wide monitor, so I cascade 2 images, 2 windows, one on each side, and then I have sort of like an overflow on my laptop to the left that counts sort of as like I'm going to get to you eventually, just hold up. And I often think, like, is there an advantage to that when you move to a smaller form factor? Is there a way to segment your priorities on a mobile OS that really does not encourage windowing, right? Android was not designed, iOS was not designed for windowing. And you can tell the way that Apple implemented windowing on the iPad, it had a very, very awkward phase. And still, even today, windowing on iOS is quite awkward. Android has always been a little bit more amenable to that because freeform was kind of like built into it from, I think, like Android 7 or 8. Like, it exists. There's a desktop mode. It doesn't work great, but at least if you're on a Chromebook, you can do it. Like, it's there. I really respect the way that Microsoft has tried to iron out all of the kinks in the implementation of windowing on Android, the way that you can easily snap from one side. That dynamic that's very similar. I think, I mean, nobody's used it, but it feels like, based on the videos we've seen, to be similar to snapping on Windows. And that is the kind of corollary that, to me, makes the most sense. They are trying to recreate as much as possible the productivity feeling on Windows 10 on a smaller device without limiting the number of apps that you can download, which is why they're using Android in the first place. It's just a matter of, like, they probably tested the top 500 apps and they probably work okay, but we're going to discover that there are thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of apps that just don't work quite right across two screens. And that's the use case that I'm kind of worried about. But that's sort of the tail, like the long tail, rather than the real world issues of, like, does Instagram work? Does Twitter work? And obviously those have been optimized already.
Yeah, and I think even with those apps not supporting the spanning, I don't think it's the end of the world on Duo, because, again, they are two separate screens. If it doesn't support spanning, just use it on one screen. The device folds 360 degrees, so you can use it as a single screen phone if you want. So you're never going to come across an app that you physically cannot use on the device. It would just be, you can't use this feature or that spanning mode or do this with it. You would just have to compromise with the one screen, or just have two apps running side by side instead, which Microsoft also touts as a feature, right? I think they call the single screen mode phone mode because it's more like a traditional phone. In the presentation, you see Panos sort of fold the screens back on it themselves and say, you recognize this, right? This is a phone. This is what a phone looks like. And then he starts texting on it and stuff. So it isn't the end of the world that most apps won't support spanning, but you're right. It will be nice to see what third-party developers do with this, because, of course, all of Microsoft's apps will support spanning. There's no way they won't. But most third-party apps aren't, at least not at launch. Kindle will. They announced that Kindle will be there, which is a big deal.
I was going to say, that was one of those things. It seems like low-hanging fruit that Kindle gets dual screen support on this, but LG didn't pull it off. Samsung hasn't pulled it off either. So somehow Microsoft got Amazon to make this special version. And the way he worded it is that it's a special version for Duo. So I'm curious if it'll work on LG or even Samsung devices anyway. But this, to me, was like, I'm already convinced myself I'm going to kind of really like this device. I'm curious about day-to-day stuff. Notification comes in. Am I going to like opening and closing it? That kind of thing. But seeing Kindle on there on dual displays and the way you flick the page and both will change, to me is totally wild, because it's already in a book format. And so it's going to feel very much like recreation of a digital book. Now, a lot of us have Kindles. It's not like a foreign thing, but Kindle is a mono screen experience. And there's two downsides to that. One is sometimes I read dense things. I read a lot of nonfiction science stuff on neuro and chemistry, or even physics. And so, like, if you read for a while, you kind of zone out. You may forget something, so you got to go back to the previous page. Seeing two pages in front of you is beneficial because you can often be on that second page and just look over and be like, oh, right, okay, that's what that was referring to. That's one scenario that I'm really looking forward to. The other one, of course, is the ability to again, do sort of like a Kindle, single page experience, but then have like OneNote open on the other side, or maybe a web browser for when sometimes you look up stuff that you're reading about, right? Oh, who's that person? I don't know much about them. Open, highlight their name, open up in a browser, read their Wikipedia real quickly, continue reading, right? So, and the ability to, read and take notes at the same time on a device like that is, as far as I know, it's not really possible today. You have to jump in and back and forth either between two devices or get out of your reading, open up the other app, and switch back and forth. I'm not saying it's not doable. I'm just saying it's maybe not optimized, and this seems a little bit more optimized. And even, Panos mentions like because of this, he started reading more. And that's exactly what I'm expecting, is I'm going to be using Kindle on this way more than holding my, I have the Samsung phone in front of me, the Note 20 Ultra. It's beautiful. I don't use it for reading because it doesn't even feel like a book, right? It feels like a giant smartphone. This thing feels like a book. And I think at a conceptual level, my brain is going to be like, yeah, you should be reading books on this thing. And I'm really curious if I do that, of course. If I seem smarter after Duo, that's probably why.
We should also mention as well that it's one of very few devices that are fully built around the pen, right? The Galaxy Note, of course, is one with pen support. And I don't think there's many others. The Surface Duo also supports Surface Pen, all in market generations. So that includes the new Slim Pen, as well as the older sort of rounded Surface Pen, and even the Surface Hubs 2 pen if you have one around. And it works in every which way you would expect it to on a Surface. You can ink into OneNote or To Do. You can use it to highlight text in a PDF and whatnot. All of the inking stuff is there. And I think if you're a big pen user of the Galaxy Note series, you're going to really like the pen support on the Surface Duo, because it's essentially the same as the Galaxy Note, just without all the gimmicky stuff. Like there's no magic wand stuff on the Surface Duo. It's just literally you take the pen, put it to screen, and it does what you expect it to do.
I'm curious if that's going to be good or not. Despite as much as I like the Note 20 Ultra, I don't use the S Pen as much as you would think from the commercials. I use it on occasion. It's great because it's always there, but I'm not like, it's still not ideal for taking notes. The form factor, the screen angle and the size is just not natural for note taking. I don't know if it's better on Duo, but I feel like they thought about that more on that device. Yeah. And so it'd be interesting.
What won't be better is storage, because we did learn that unfortunately it doesn't attach magnetically to the front, which we thought it would, because it does on the Neo, but the Duo doesn't have that apparently. So you're going to have to slip the pen in your pocket if you want to take one with you.
Yeah, version 2. Someone pointed out, and I think it's a really good thing, reading comics on this device. I don't read a ton of comics anymore, but I did go through a phase years ago when I had an iPad where I would download a comic reader and I'd read comics on it. And yeah, I mean, could you imagine dual AMOLED displays, wide color gamut, this resolution, 441 PPI, and being able to read comics like that? I mean, that would be awesome. Like that would get me probably back into reading comics again. So I don't know. Bader, what are your thoughts about that? Do you see that as changing your sort of perspective on mobile devices? Would you be able to give up a Kindle if you're even using one?
Look, I mean, I have like 6 Kindles, and I always end up reading. I have Moon Player or Moon Reader Pro. I've had that app for forever. And what I end up doing is I always have a physical book on hand that I store next to my bed, and then I only read before bed, and then I get annoyed, so I will rent the book from my local library and download it to Libby, which is the app that Overdrive allows your library to. It's Overdrive owned, but it lets you rent library books and read it there. And I don't mind. I mean, I read on anything. I don't care if I'm reading it on a tiny screen or a massive, dual screen. I think it's just about framing it in a way that is pleasant or enjoyable for you. Like if you can. I know people who use a Note phone to edit video using like Power Director Pro. I would hate to edit video on my phone, even with an S Pen. I just find the whole thing to be a slog. I want a bigger screen. And yet I can read a whole book on a 4.5-inch phone, no problem. So it's about figuring out what works for you. Obviously, this larger canvas makes it easier to justify trying to recreate these things. But ultimately, that's been the push-pull about, like, do I still want a tablet if my phone has a 6.9-inch display, right? A lot of people say yes, but increasingly we're seeing, especially on the Android side, that most people are just buying a phone and using that as their phone-tablet combo. So, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I love the idea of, like, framing my life differently because I have 2 distinct displays and trying to find ways that they can be used simultaneously. But I'm I'm not sure that it's going to completely like overhaul my productivity. I would love to see a really in-depth guide by Microsoft. I'm sure there will come, or like people who will dig into this and be like, okay, here is how we recommend you combine these apps together, and here's a bundle that you can download so that you can just tap once and it'll open this into, you know, a pre-programmed format. And that's the kind of thing that I'm looking forward to seeing.
I'm going to try a little experiment right now. My earbuds, my right one is only at 8% battery. My left is at 39%, which that's because the right one is the master, I think, or something like that.
Yeah.
So someone says I should be able to, and I believe this is true, I should be able to take my right one off and I'm going to stick it into the charger and hopefully I won't lose connection. So let's try this live.
Well, while you do that, I will bring up the next topic I kind of want to talk about, and that's an equivalent to Samsung DeX. A lot of people have been asking, does Surface Duo have like an Android desktop mode when you dock it to a display? And the answer to that is no, and I think I know why that is. Microsoft doesn't want you doing PC-like things on Android. The only reason they've gone with Android on the Surface Duo is because Android is the best choice for phones, for devices with screen sizes of less than 9 or 8 inches. And they have the mobile apps as well. Anything bigger than that, they want you to be using Windows. Panos has said this himself many, many times. And in fact, in the presentation that Panos did, there's a whole segment on your phone using Surface Duo. What Microsoft wants you to do, instead of using a dedicated Android DeX mode with, you know, Android Office and Android Outlook, they want you to use your PC. And if you need to access a mobile device, a mobile app, you can use the Your Phone Apps feature to get access to that. They don't want you working in the Android environment for PC-related things, because that goes against, you know, Windows. Panos loves Windows. Panos is all about Windows. If he could have this phone running Windows, he would. The reason it doesn't is because it comes back to those apps, and that's the number one thing he says every time he's asked. Oh, it's about the apps. You guys want apps, so here's Android. If you didn't want apps, we'd be running Windows.
That was a really funny in his Q&A that he was asked that question, and everybody was expecting like a long-winded answer, and he just went apps.
Yeah.
And that was like it. He's like, that's all it came down to. By the way, obviously, as you can probably tell, and as people predicted, recharging one earbud worked beautifully. The other one's charging. This one's still working fine. Didn't lose connection or anything. Go Microsoft. Let's talk a little bit about some of the unique features of Surface Duo, because I thought this was, again, if you just see a render, you see the price tag, and you see a spec sheet, you don't understand necessarily all the kind of cool stuff this does. One of the cool things I didn't know about, which I thought was neat, was SwiftKey. We know SwiftKey was going to be on here, pre-ships with the device as a default keyboard. We knew that they've been working on a keyboard for a while. But one feature I didn't know about was when you have one app open on, say, the left side, and then you go into its text field and the keyboard pops up just like on Android, the keyboard pops up, but it's I forgot how he described it, but it'll be closer to that left side where your thumb is. So you can just type with your thumb, but the keyboard is now adjusted. Instead of conceptually, most people, this is an LG thing, right? LG would have just made the full screen keyboard for that one side, and you'd have to try to stretch your thumb over to try to hit those keys one-handed. Microsoft pushed it over automatically. And then same on the right-hand side. So if you open an app on the right-hand side, the keyboard pops up over there. It'll be more slotted towards the right side so you can reach over and get it. And Panos used this as an example of how this device adapts to you. And that was like a really driving point during the presentation. Of course, there are other ways to type too. So, you know, and he brought this up, which I was really excited about. He said, when I really want to get into it, you know, he goes into is it presentation mode? No, in the presentation, what's the
compose mode?
Yeah, compose mode. Yeah, so that's where it looks like a Nintendo DS basically, and the keyboard comes up there, and the full bottom of the screen now is a keyboard, and that's like when I really want to just type out stuff. That's what I use, and that's how I plan on probably end up using this device a lot. When I'm gonna make an angry tweet to some of you on Twitter, I'll probably end up using that. But I thought that was super cool. I don't know, Zach, what did you see that was kind of neat that you thought was different?
They didn't show it, but the peak mode, which you've seen before, it is part of this device. I've seen a few people asking,
yes,
is peak mode still a thing? They didn't show it off. You're right, they didn't show it off, but it is still a thing, and it does ship on the device. Peak mode is where if you open the screen slightly, you get this sort of dedicated mini UI that tells you the date and time and your most recent notifications, which I think is a super nice sort of thing to have because it doesn't have an outer display. And I actually did want to ask both of you, what are your thoughts on that? What are your thoughts on Surface Pro not having an outer display? Is that going to be a problem for people, or do you think opening something isn't the end of the world?
Vader?
Look, I mean, I get it. It adds a ton of room and a ton of expense, and the original Fold's outer display is kind of useless. And you can the difference here is that you can permanently keep one of you can turn it around and permanently keep one of the displays your default. So I don't see that being a problem. I really do think that this will come down to personal preference. Like, you keep it closed because you want to protect the screen, but if you're comfortable or you have the bumper and you're not worried about scratching it too much, then you're just going to keep it open so that it's easy to access when you take it out of your pocket.
Yeah, I think Panos almost used this as a selling point, and it's an interesting debate, right? There's an argument that we spend too much time in our smartphones. There's a reason why Android and iPhone both now have a screen time calculator. It tells you how much time you're spending on these devices. And there's a thing where, we're always getting bogged down by notifications. You'd be talking to someone and your phone goes off. Oh, what happened? And we're always kind of getting distracted that way and having to look at stuff. It's one reason I stopped wearing a smartwatch at home, because my phone goes off. I see it on the computer. My wrist is vibrating. It's just like, whoa, I don't need this much notifications going on. But I understand, Bader knows this. Zach knows this. When we're at events, having a smartwatch is pretty awesome because you are getting hammered with notifications all the time. So having that kind of communication is important. And I wrote an article last year saying, listen, if Microsoft doesn't come out with a wearable, having one with this device may be a good idea. And I think it's a solvable problem. If you have earbuds with you and you have a smartwatch, Zach and I both recommend the Active 2 right now. And that should work with this device, no problem. That kind of solves the problem. In fact, I find smartwatches to be a better notification system than phones themselves. My Z Flip has that little tiny cute screen on the outside. I appreciate the effort. It sucks. I never use it. If I see it light up, I know something's there, but I'm never going, oh, okay. And always on displays are kind of cool so long as your device is on the table. But even I still miss stuff there because I just, from a distance here, all I see here is just a bunch of icons. And it's just like, I don't know if that's important or not. So I feel like a smartwatch is going to be crucial for people who do find that as a drawback. Bader, I said Zach and I are kind of fans of the Galaxy Active 2. What's your favorite smartwatch? Since we're on that topic anyway, what would you recommend for people, who are in that pickle?
Well, I'm wearing the Galaxy Watch 3 right now, which is basically the Galaxy Watch mixed with the Galaxy Watch Active 2, right? It's got the Galaxy Watch aesthetic with the health features of the Active 2. There aren't a lot of great options for Android users. You kind of sacrifice something if you go with any of the options, right? The Galaxy series does health tracking pretty well, battery life pretty well. The apps are okay, but not great. Wear OS is just a dumpster fire for everything except notifications, where it's handily better than the Galaxy series just because it has all of those native hooks into Android. I like Fitbit sometimes. Like the Versa 2 is great just because the battery lasts a week and you don't really have to worry about it. The sleep and the health tracking is far more accurate than anything you'll find on Samsung or Wear OS. But again, the notifications are pretty limited, and I find, regardless of if it's not a Wear OS watch and your OEM, I don't know if you've ever talked about this, but some companies like OnePlus, they put severe kind of like hibernation mode on many of the apps to try to save battery life. And as a result, the notifications you get on your watch are delayed because the app is asleep and then it only wakes up every once in a while to check for notifications. That's a problem if you're wearing a smartwatch, because when the app wakes up, especially if it's like an email app, you're going to get like 12 notifications at once. So your watch is just going to go bzz, 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 bzz. And that happens with my Versa 2. It happens with my Galaxy Watch 3. It doesn't happen with Wear OS because the OS is smarter about it. But that doesn't save Wear OS from being an otherwise terrible operating system. So I'll stick with Galaxy until something else comes around.
Yeah, I think that's probably the safe bet too. I agree. Fitbit is good for people who need a few notifications, the real important ones. My phone is ringing, and maybe a text message. If that's kind of, and maybe even email or something like that. If that's your priority, that's all you really care about. Fitbits are actually pretty fine for it. You're not going to get a lot of, at least on Android, you do get to do the replies, which is kind of cool. So you get that at least. You can reply with pre-canned things on your wrists. So that helps. If you need more than that, yeah, the Samsungs are probably going to be your best bet. Into something, who knows what's going to happen with Wear OS. I agree with. I have which one I have? I have the latest Fossil. Love the hardware. Everybody loves the hardware.
Yeah, the hardware is fantastic.
It's just the rest of it's terrible. But and the problem, of course, with the Active too, and the Samsung stuff is on Samsung phones it works really pretty well. On regular Android phones, you have to download I think like 3 to 4 apps to make it all work. And then you can later on install stuff, but it's a little bit more Samsung-y.
On the subject of notifications, I'm going to be curious to see how haptics are on the Surface Duo. Haptics are a big deal to me. I really fuss over how good or bad haptics are on a phone. I think obviously the iPhone's the gold standard. Pixel's pretty close. Samsung are finally up there with their latest flagships and whatnot. I'm going to be curious to see if Microsoft focused on the haptics with Surface Duo. If I had to put money on it, I'd say they haven't, and it's just going to be a standard like spinning vibration motor. But I really, maybe if they've got some, yeah, right. But I really hope they've got some sort of professional haptic motor in there, because I think haptics make such a big deal when it comes to things like gestures, especially with the spanning, right? You want to feel it when you hit the bezel, and the device lets you know with a haptic with haptic feedback, or when you're typing with SwiftKey. I just really hope they focus on that, and as far as I'm aware, they haven't.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I just wanted to revisit the thing I was kind of saying with Duo is, Panos was saying, basically, when you close that device, you're kind of putting it away. It allows you to focus on, if you're in front of a computer at that point, or you're doing something else, driving, for instance. And for some people, that's an important thing, that ability for mental health, the ability to close a device and be like, no, I'm out, I'm done with this right now, instead of constantly looking over. I can't stand. One thing, and Bader knows this too, when we would get all together, we'd be at events, whether it's Vegas and CES or Berlin for IFA, we'd all go out to dinner. And it was kind of the most annoying thing with a bunch of tech people, because we'd all be sitting there at dinner and we all have our smartphones in front of us, and it was just everybody was always looking at their smartphones, picking them up and reading stuff, not making eye contact with each other. And I'm pretty much a stickler for this, just because the way my mom raised me. But it's just like I try to put my phone away and like actually talk to the person. But I don't know, maybe Duo will solve that a little bit for some of us. Yeah. Other things about this device I thought was interesting, and just questions I know. I wrote a massive Surface Duo FAQ. I believe it's up to 2,600 words right now. I keep adding to it. If you have questions that we don't answer here in this podcast, please go check it out. I'm pretty sure we answer almost everything. So, for instance, is this an unlocked device? Yes, it's globally unlocked. It should work in Europe. We're going to send one to Zach. We're not expecting any issues. There is an AT&T model. If you do buy that one is apparently SIM locked and doesn't have eSIM on it. Now, why would you do that? I get that question a lot. Why would you buy that device? There's actually, I think of 3 good reasons. One, you're on an AT&T contract and you get an upgrade plan. You get some sort of discount. That's one reason. 2, AT&T devices are quirky. To get visual voicemail and Wi-Fi calling to work, they often have to be certified to be working on the AT&T's network and have like a driver thing installed. And Bader may be able to talk a little bit more about that. But you can't just take an unlocked device, put on AT&T and get those features, which a lot of people will actually value. Three, I would say warranty returns and servicing in case you have a problem is pretty important too. So there is actually justification for, I would say, buying through AT&T if you're already an AT&T customer. But if you don't want to, you want to use this on T-Mobile, go ahead. If you want to use it on Verizon, go ahead. We have heard one of the reasons why this date was pushed back. It was supposed to launch originally August 28th. It's pushed back down to September 10th because of apparently Verizon's certification, but it will work on Verizon. It works on Sprint too, but now since Sprint is T-Mobile, you have to get a T-Mobile card. It's not a big deal, but you should have no problems either. Doesn't have 5G, as Zach already mentioned. Does have full GPS. In fact, has every GPS as far as I can tell on there. It does come with Google Apps, of course. It does have Google Search, Google Assistant, Calendar, Drive, Duo, which is ironic, Photos, Play Movies and TV. Of course, has the Play Store. Has all the standard Google stuff on there. You don't need to use it. Some of it you'll be able to uninstall. Most you can't. It does have a bunch of Microsoft stuff pre-installed, including all of Office, Outlook, Teams, OneDrive, Edge, OneNote, To Do, News, Authenticator, Bing Search. My favorite, it does have the Microsoft Solitaire collection. I actually don't play Solitaire. I think it's hilarious. They put that on there.
It really is the device for Microsoft ecosystem users, right? Like, I feel like most normal Android users aren't going to bother with it, even if it was cheaper, because of the Microsoft-centric nature of this device. It really is for Microsoft fans and Microsoft ecosystem people.
Yep. And speaking of, we talked about this a lot. Your Phone, the Microsoft Your Phone ability. Yeah. We knew, of course, it was going to support Your Phone. The question was, does it support basically the more advanced link to Windows that Samsung devices do? Now, Zach and I fully anticipated it would, but we also acknowledge this is Microsoft. But we can now confirm it does support link to Windows, which means you'll get full app streaming on this. It'll behave just like Samsung. You get that low latency connection, which is really nice because your photos will load quickly, especially at only an 11 megapixel. If you plan on using the device that way, you're going to be all set. There is no DeX mode. There is no continuum. I know a lot of people saw USB Type-C 3.1 video out. They're like, oh my God, what's the video out? It's nothing. It's literally video out. It does not turn into a dockable sort of PC.
We should mention as well that Microsoft has committed to 3 years of Android OS and security updates, which is a big deal for an Android device. A lot of people saw this news and thought, that's terrible. What, my Surface PC lasts 10 years. Yeah. It's like, well, hang on.
Vader, you know this better than anybody else here since you cover it. Explain to our audience, because we posted this, and a lot of our own audience was like, 3 years, that's it. Shocked, disappointed. Thought that Microsoft was cutting corners here, that it should be like 5 years. Can you just explain a little bit about the context of Android updates, the problems there, how 3 years is actually a very new concept and it's actually not widely adopted?
Yeah, well, it comes down to the fact that the companies that make Android phones are sourcing components and asking the companies that make those components to support them with drivers far beyond what they normally do based on their contracts and their deals with these manufacturers. So if you think about Qualcomm, for instance, Qualcomm is a major source of the components that go into most Android phones. Qualcomm signs deals with these companies to support various components for X number of years. It used to be 2 years. That has increased to 3 years. And with Project Mainline, which is an endeavor that Google launched to separate a lot of the updating procedures for these companies from the core OS. So, for instance, a lot of times in previous years, you would have to wait until a new platform update to get driver updates for various parts of your phone. That's no longer the case. So they've kind of split that and allow Google can send out a pretty massive bit of code without affecting any of those low-level drivers. But it's also made it easier for those drivers to be updated without affecting the rest of the operating system, which leads companies like Qualcomm and Broadcom and many of the other suppliers to be more likely to keep those components updated. And Microsoft is only the second company outside of Google itself to support 3 years of platform updates. Samsung announced it last week at Unpacked. Now Microsoft is here. So Google, with its Pixel phones, has always supported 3 years of updates, but it's been the only one to do so. And, you know, in the world of Windows, that's not a whole lot of time, but we know that most people only keep their phones for about 3 years. So that level of support, unseen before in Android, is a big, big deal, especially if it sets a precedent for the rest of the industry.
Yeah, I was actually very happy about this because they could have just done 2 years. And to be honest, had they just done 2 years, I think a lot of us would have been like, yeah, well, we're expecting like another version probably sometime in 2021. You know, it's like, and not many people are going to buy this one anyway. So it's like, but 3 years is nice, right? They didn't have to do that. They did do that. And they had an extra hurdle in the fact that they're shipping this with a Snapdragon 855, which already has less support time frame than the 865. You know, just like, you know, Windows PCs and older processors, they only get supported based on how new they are. So yeah, that's a really big deal. Trying to think what else we can.
It also has. I wanted to mention that it has an unlockable bootloader as well. Oh, rather, you wanted to complain about some people who were like, "Oh, Windows."
So yeah, so for the tinkerers out there, this reportedly does have an unlockable bootloader, which means in theory we could hack other stuff on there. And of course, a lot of people are immediately like, "Let's put Windows on it." And first of all, I hate you people. The reason I say this is because I've been arguing for the last 2 years about how awesome Windows 10 on ARM is, at least for a certain demographic of people. And I was using a Snapdragon 850 device, PC, and I was fine with it. It's not amazing, but I was like, I was able to use it at events. And so many people told me Windows runs terribly on it. Why would you want that? You can't do anything. And now a lot of these same people are like, let's put Windows on the Snapdragon 855. Like, it's the same thing. Plus, it's a $1,400 device, which is actually more than any Windows on ARM PC ever was. And as Zach correctly points out, Windows doesn't actually support dual screens. So we're not really sure, you know, or the drivers here, so we're not sure how far we would get. But I get it. You're a tinkerer. You want to buy a $1,400 phone and, you know, potentially brick it. Well, you know, here's your opportunity. So that apparently will be a thing. I want to talk about, does it have, you know, biometrics to unlock? Yes, it has a fingerprint scanner, not in display. It's on the side of the device where the power button is. And so that's going to be how you do it. It doesn't have Windows Hello. I would have loved that, but obviously how thin this device is, the sensor array needed for Windows Hello is, you know, just like on the iPhone. It's a lot of sensors going in there, including infrared, if you need that. They could have just done it with a front-facing camera, but if you've ever used Android, that sort of level of facial recognition, which Samsung phones now do, is not technically secure. You can fool that with a photo, which is why third-party apps don't count it as a way to unlock. You know, it's only fingerprint if you have that. So, fingerprint reader. In the box, you're going to get a bumper case, which we've seen in the photos. You get the bumper, you get a charger cable, Type-C, and an 18-watt fast charger. So it does support fast charging, and that's basically about it. We did see in the video different color bumpers. There's 3 different colors. Well, in addition to the glacier white, there's like a black one, there's a blue one, and there's it looks like cherry red, but they call it emerald red, I think. Not emerald red, ember red. We don't know if those are coming out. It sure looks like they're considering it, but they haven't announced it yet. But they obviously have them. I've heard of in internal documents for training, they're referenced or shown. So fingers crossed that will be coming out, because I think that actually looks really rad. It does add like just that little flair, and those colors match precisely the colors of Surface Pro's type covers and pens. So you get that whole nice kind of.
You'll also be able to get a D-brand skin, which is nice.
Yep, and D-brand announced that they have new skins that will be, and they actually do look really cool. I'm hoping they do like a leather one, because they'll really kind of complete the whole moleskin concept here. Let's see what else in this FAQ here that I got. I don't know if there's anything else. You mentioned the pen. No 5G, Sprint can work. All the bands are listed. I think that's kind of about it, actually. And you shouldn't have any problem with any Android app. That's a crucial thing that still some people really didn't understand. You'll be able to install any single app on the Play Store on this device. Not all will do the full spanning thing. We only know about a few so far, but you're not going to have any compatibility problems here, which is kind of really nifty. Anything else I've missed that you guys want to talk about? Bader, do you have some things you want to share?
Look, I mean, I feel like people, if, you know, you said it really well, like, don't overthink it. If you're expecting something, if you're expecting the stars, just like be happy with the moon, you know, like, this is the first gen product. It's still incredibly, it's an incredible engineering feat. If you look at the diagrams, the engineering diagrams that Microsoft posted, it's in the briefing video. They look over where the batteries are, where the components are in the two screens. It is an engineering marvel. The problem, and look, I'll be completely honest, the problem is that the Moto Razr, the foldable Moto Razr, that's also an engineering marvel. Like, if you look at how they made that hinge work and everything, the phone is terrible. It's not a good product, but the engineering that went into it is incredibly impressive. So I think that's really what it comes down to, is that if Microsoft pulled off a really impressive tech demo, but didn't follow through with a coherent, you know, like the use case is not coherent, and they can't tell that story about why somebody would want this over a foldable or a single screen phone, then they failed. But Microsoft did this with the Surface in 2012. They did it again and again and again, and they got it into everybody's thick skulls that is a really important and necessary form factor. I have no reason to think that they won't do it again this time.
Yeah, I've also seen a lot of people online saying, like, "Oh, this will never get a version 2." No matter how poorly Duo 1 performs, there is a Duo 2 coming. I'm pretty sure we'll even see a Duo 3. Microsoft is committed to this product line. They've purchased an outside company to help work on the operating system side. Microsoft is committed. This is Panos' baby. He's always wanted to make a phone, and they're not gonna quit this even after one generation. So for those of you doubters, don't worry. We'll be seeing a Duo 2 likely next year with more features and improvements.
I think Microsoft will only release a Duo 2 if they maintain a $1 trillion market cap. If they fall under that, I don't know. I mean, it's all over for them. Let's be honest.
I forgot. Oh, I was going to say now. Yeah, I mean, that's true. You know, Surface, we do expect Duo 2. Oh, I was going to mention about how, you know, a lot of people bring up Microsoft's failures when we talk about new products and stuff like that. And, you know, there's a certain fairness to this, although I always try to couch it in, like, a lot of that stuff was Ballmer era stuff that Nadella didn't agree upon, or, you know, Nadella didn't love Windows Phone, but he did give Windows Phone and the Windows 10 mobile team a fair shot. He came on, he didn't cancel Windows 10 mobile. He said, go for it. Let's see what you can do. I'll publicly say we support it. You guys can release your phones, make your deals with OEMs, and we'll see. And let's try to do the enterprise thing. We'll see if that works. You let them try. It didn't work out, right? But when you look at the Surface line, and this is clearly a Surface, and Panos is, you know, that's why he says, you know, is it a phone? It's a Surface. When you look at the Surface line, there really are no failures. Now, people will go back, well, Surface 1 and Surface 2, and specifically Surface RT. I would say Surface RT wasn't so much a hardware failure. It was a confusion over the OS in conjunction with the launch of Windows 8, which Windows 8 itself was not, you know, received very well. That caused the problem. But the real problem, the reason they took that $900 million write-down, which they'll never live down, is because of stock. They anticipated. I remember covering the Surface 1 launch. I was there in New York City when they opened the store. Panos was there. He was signing people's stuff. They over-anticipated demand. And as a result, they ordered too many. They thought they're going to sell a lot more than they ended up doing. And so that $900 million was because they had so much stock left over they couldn't sell. This is why Surfaces, new ones, get very limited releases. And that's what we're seeing here too. They can control that story. And I've said before, like, if they are only planning to sell 10,000, or they only make 10,000 and they sell 9,000, it's a success. They did well. If they go, we're going to sell 500,000 of these, and they only sell 40,000, that's technically a failure. So it's all about their expectations. And we don't know what their expectations are in terms of numbers and dollars and all that kind of stuff. But I can tell you they're tightly controlling it. They're making sure that the amount of devices they make never gets way ahead of the actual demand that's out there. And this Gen 1 is going to be about conversation, about getting people talking about it, thinking about it, and moving on. We'll get to V2. More people will be like, all right, now I'm kind of on board with this. They finally added NFC Qi and the camera's better. Now I'm kind of interested in this. And by version 3, they will really have figured this out. I'll also say this is version 1. They're new to Android and making phones again. They need a little time to figure this stuff out. We have to wait and see the cadence of those Android updates, right? We don't know if they're going to come exactly on the mark, or they're going to be like some companies, they're 20 days later, 30 days later. We don't know that. So that's going to be interesting. That's going to be a learning process for them. And because of those reasons, if you want to sit this out and be like, I'm not parting my $1,400 right now, like I said, that is a very rational decision. But for some of us who love technology, who see the value in this, we're going to take the plunge early. Zach is buying his. He sent me money.
I'm the sucker that paid for one.
Yeah. So it's like, we're not just, I know a lot of people, of course you're going to say that. You're getting one for free. No, they're only giving us one as a review unit, supposedly. I don't have it yet. But yeah, I don't know. I think this is exciting stuff. I think if you follow technology, even if this device isn't for you, you should be kind of curious about this and how smartphones and mobile devices are going to change in the coming years. I think this is the beginning of that. Samsung is part of that conversation, obviously. LG a bit too. Apple, the thing is, I know people are going to, like, in 3 to 5 years, we'll all have kind of devices like this. Shoot, by that time, we'll have like trifold devices, just like at a Westworld. And it's going to become common and normal. And we're going to look, and I want to get a list of all the people who made fun of this back here in 2020. And be like, see, this was where the seed started. So I don't know. I'm very excited about this stuff. We'll see how it works, though. Still a lot of questions that remain. Zach, do you have any final thoughts?
Just I guess a brief roundup, really. So $1,400 for the 128 gig, $1,500 for the 256 gig. There's no 64 gig option. We were expecting that, but it turns out they just decided not to ship it. Then it's coming September 10th. As Dan mentioned, that is a slight delay. It was supposed to come out last week of August, as I had said a few episodes ago. It was supposed to be August 28th, but that ended up not happening. In fact, that delay was so late, our initial press materials mentioned August 28th before they had to follow up and confirm. Actually, no, September 10th. But yes, coming September 10th, US only. You can buy it at Best Buy, Microsoft Store, and through AT&T if you are somebody on that. And that's basically everything about the Duo. Of course, we'll be getting one in for review. And in a few weeks' time, we'll be talking more about the device when we have it in hand.
Yeah, and Best Buy, and I imagine AT&T will have them on display, so you can go check them out yourself, which I really encourage. In the meantime, please go check out the Microsoft Panos Panay presentation about this device. It really does a way better job than anything we've all said here today in explaining why this device is interesting. I'm not saying you're going to be 100% convinced, but I'm pretty positive most of you or a lot of you will watch it and come away with like understanding why some of us are pretty excited about this and why it actually looks kind of cool. But go make up your own mind. That's what the internet is for. Other than that, Dan Bader, where can we find you on the internets and on the podcasts?
So I host a weekly podcast at the Android Central podcast, and you'll find that wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts, as every single podcast you listen to says. You can find me on Twitter at JourneyDan, which is where I post hot takes, lukewarm takes, and more often than not, cold takes. And you can find my work, or mostly my coworkers' work, at Android Central, because you know as well as I do, we all run a pretty tight ship here. So it's nice to have a bunch of different viewpoints. And thanks again for being on our show yesterday.
Not a problem. What's funny, two things. One, I forgot to give Bader credit here. He helped restart this Windows Central podcast years ago when after we went on hiatus, after we went off the air for a few years, and Bader led the initiative to get that started, and it was actually on the first dozen or so shows. So thank you for that. Also, his podcasts are way more professional and laid out. His are more like NPR episodes, which I've always appreciated, where Zach and I kind of like show up at 2:30 to do this one. And we're just like, oh, let's just talk. But that's what makes it fun too. So always appreciate. Thanks for having me on yesterday. And yeah, please go check out their work at Android Central and especially their takes. Jerry Hildebrand's been writing a lot about Duo. He's also very excited about this device. But they all have, non-Microsoft opinions on this stuff, which I think is very valuable to consider. You can follow me on Twitter, Daniel_Rubino, Rubino. Same thing with Instagram. And you can follow Zach at ZACBOWDEN. And he will have some more news. I'm going to tease it, Zach, on Duo 2 at some point in the future. But there's stuff there. There's stuff there already. But for now, we're focusing on Duo 1. But Zach is the legend here. Don't forget, go back to 2017. He first broke the story about a dual screen device in the works.
I've been waiting longer than anybody else. Well, maybe apart from Panos.
Yeah, technically, I'm 5 minutes after you told me waiting for you. But your reporting on this has just been stellar. Obviously, almost everything you've said has completely come true, except when Microsoft changes all of a sudden. But we can't control that, right? But man, excellent reporting. Really glad we have you on our team for that info. But that does it for us. We're going to do a Q&A now. Beta, if you want to stick around, you can join us too for this. So we're going to do about 20 minutes of questions with people in our audience, things we didn't talk about or didn't get to answer on this podcast. If you're listening to this recorded, you don't get to hear that part, unfortunately, because it's just too weird and awkward. But you can always join us every Friday, 2:30 p.m. Eastern Time, YouTube/Windows Central, where we have a live video and, of course, the chat going on. Other than that, though, we'll see you next time. Don't forget to wear a mask. Stay safe, everybody.
Awesome. So, yeah, Beta, you're welcome to stick around, or you can drop off if you've got other things to do. No worries whatsoever.
I do have to leave because I have to pick up my daughter from school. Sure. So I will jump off. What's the episode number?
191.
191. Yep. Holy crap. That's crazy.
Been doing this a long time. And that doesn't count. And we restarted when you restarted it. We started from episode 1 again.
Yeah, we did. It was me, you, and Derek for like 12 episodes.
Yeah, that was fun.
What a weird world.
And then I showed up.
Then you showed up and ruined everything.
It's true. That's what he does. But he added the British accent, which made it sound more authoritative.
Exactly. Or authoritarian, depending on whether you were taken over by the colonies.
True.
Over the years. Yeah, thanks, guys. I'm going to jump off. I'll send you the file, and I will talk to you later.
Yeah, send it to Zach. That'd be good.
Cheers.
Okay.
Thanks, Beta.
Yep.
Thank you.
All right, so question time, our favorite part of the show. What mic am I using? I'm using a HyperX Quadcast, I think it's called. It's got a cool red light on it. Is the living image stuff they showed off in October coming to the Duo in a software update? It's a good question. As far as I'm aware, no. Actually, I think it might show up eventually, but I don't think it's there on day one, and I don't think there's an ETA for it either. But yeah, you're right. They did show that off, kind of, and it's not there in the shipping product.
I'm going to share in the room here because I have the link active. That's the Android Central podcast from yesterday. If you didn't get enough of me talking about Surface Duo today, you can go listen to that one for another 90 minutes of Surface Duo. But that also has the interesting perspective of Jerry Hildebrand and Bader, of course. So,
if this hasn't been discussed yet, any thoughts on the new dev channel Insiderable that came out Wednesday? Nothing, not really. There's basically nothing in it as per usual. They have a new sort of what's new thing that pops up now when a new feature update is released. But I mean, it's good to have, but it's really not worth a 20-minute segment on the podcast. Today's episode was all about Surface Duo. So anything else that happened in the world of Microsoft, we will save till next week. I know people wanted us to talk about the Xbox Series S confirmation and stuff. That'll be next week.
Yes, and TikTok. Got to talk about the TikToks.
I'd like to know how various experiences and scenarios work on the Duo. For example, is there a bedside mode with a clock, etc. that stays on? How about using it in a vehicle with a dash phone holder? So as far as I'm aware, I think it has an always-on display when the displays are open. So you could put it into tent mode and just turn the always-on display on. and it would show you the time and stuff. I think you could do that. Don't quote me on that though. I'd need to confirm if it does have an always on display mode. But I'd be surprised if it doesn't. And regarding using it in a dash phone holder, I think most phone holders will be able to hold it in single screen mode just fine. It is wider than most smartphones, but it's not incredibly wide. It's about the same width as a BlackBerry Passport, which I think fitted in most car holders anyway. So we have to wait and see though regarding that.
Someone reminded me I could put in my other earbud, and I have. It did restart, redo the connection, which was no big deal, but it's at 99%. So yeah, it charges fast, that's for sure.
I think the videos mentioned that an app will open in the screen/window that is free. So what happens if two screens are already running apps and we try to open a third one? It will open in the opposite screen where you initiated that third app. So if you have, say, Outlook and OneNote open and you click on a link in OneNote which is on the right screen, it will open that third screen on the left screen. It will replace the app you're not using. So that's how that works.
Does it? Because
Yes.
I was a little confused about that too.
So essentially how it works is in the app if you have no apps open, if you're on the launcher, wherever you initiate the app icon, it will open on that screen. So if the Outlook app is on the left screen and you press on the icon, it will open on the left display, which leaves the right display free, which you can then go into the launcher and open a second app. Or if you say click on a link in Outlook, it will open in the other screen that isn't currently running an app. If you're running two apps, it will then just assume that the app you're currently tapping on something to initiate another app in is the app you're using, and will treat the other display as the free one, even though it's still got an app running in it. It sounds confusing, but once you use it, you'll understand why that is the case. It's just the most natural way to do it.
Volty, voice over LTE, does it support? I don't know. I'm going to probably go with no, but it may. I don't use that too often. I do Wi-Fi calling, but not the voice over LTE, which is still kind of weirdly rolling out here, I think, in the US. I don't really know. Dan, you've held this device. Is it sturdy enough to stick in a back pants pocket and then sit down? Yes and no. There's glass. Obviously, the displays are glass, but the exterior is glass too. It's basically glass and metal, which is why it weighs 250 grams, by the way, which is not light at all. It's actually pretty heavy. It's heavier than the Note 20 Ultra, but because of its design, the way it's spread out, it's very deceiving. So it doesn't feel heavy. It does feel, I would say, substantial. It feels really good. It's kind of like the first time I held an iPhone when I was up to that point, maybe using a plastic Samsung Windows phone. Like that moment when you go from like that plastic kind of device and it feels hollow and you pick up an iPhone, like, oh, I kind of get what people were talking about Apple so much. That's how I felt when I held the Duo. It was just like, this thing feels really just elegant. Now, will it survive in your back pocket? I imagine you could probably snap it in half if you sit at the right angle, right? So I'd be careful. I wouldn't say it felt fragile in terms of like me bending it or anything like that. I would be concerned about dropping it on pavements. This is something I'll try to answer a little bit more when we actually get the unit, try to do the review for and stuff. And by the way, we are going to do a video for that. So, don't worry about that. But it does apparently fit in your pockets. No problem.
Yeah.
So,
will the Surface Duo support the Surface Pro 4's pen? Yes, it will. Zach, what's the Duo 2 tease? I'm not talking about Duo 2 today. I'm starting to hear some stuff about what Microsoft is planning for Duo 2, but I haven't got enough confirmation on a lot of it yet, and I also don't have enough information to turn it into a story yet either. But it's in development. I am told it should be coming next year, likely towards the end of next year, and it will improve. It will be a better phone than Gen 1.
Obviously, yeah, it will probably improve things in the obvious ways.
Yes.
Do you think Duo 2 will be priced higher to compensate with more modern specs?
So this is a great question. So one of my sources speculated, so this isn't like confirmation, but they speculated that perhaps the reason why Duo 1 is so expensive is so that when Duo 2 rolls around,
they don't need to raise the price.
It's still $1,400, and they're still making money on it. So that could be a reason. And honestly, I think that might be a good way to do that, right?
Yeah, we talked about that when we were debating the price last time about how, because I said $9.99. I was also assuming the 64 gig version was a thing, which it's not. So, no fairness to me. But then I said the problem, of course, is if you do add in more stuff to it, it's 5G, it's got Qi, it's got NFC, then that can just absorb those costs. So then we have to probably raise the price. Whereas they have the high price now, when version 2 comes out, it's going to be like, oh, it's all that. And that's kind of how they've done Surface in the past. I also wrote, in today's article that Microsoft typically puts stuff on sale. Like, I was shocked last year. Surface Pro 7, Laptop 3, and Pro X all came out. And about 2 months later, when the holiday season was really in full effect and Black Friday came around, they were all discounted by at least $200. And you couldn't, and at first it was the Pro X, and you may be like, oh, of course, the Pro X, no one's buying it. Here we go, fire sale. But no, they did it to the Pro 7 and the Laptop 3. And they did that to drive holiday sales, which worked out. They actually had a very good quarter. They almost hit $2 billion that quarter. But my hunch is they kind of build in a little buffer there so that they could then put it on sale come November and, for Black Friday, in which case save $200. Trade in your Samsung phone, save another $600 or $700. Now all of a sudden it's not that big of a deal, right? So I would not be surprised if that happens here.
That said, Surface Studio never gets a price cut. So
true, and I have confirmed that even Microsoft employees are not getting an employee discount on this device.
On the Duo, yeah.
So it's like, so maybe. Yeah, so I could be wrong on the sale thing. If you don't see the sale happening, remember, I did add that caveat that even if you work at Microsoft, you're not getting a discount on this. And they aren't apparently doing the education discount right now. So it goes to tell you. But I don't think they care. I really don't think that they care if, as I said, Jimmy down the street and your grandma buys this. They don't really care. Yeah.
How does the vision for the Duo differ from the original Andromeda vision? So that's an interesting question. It does differ in quite a few ways, but I think the core aspects are still there. Obviously, dual screens make you more productive. That was always the original sort of thing for Duo, for Andromeda. But Andromeda, I think, was way more focused on the inking side of things. If you remember us talking about it, the initial software, it was Windows, but the desktop was OneNote, more or less. It had a digital inking notebook that you could ink into, and that was sort of like the default home screen. It still had a start menu, which you could run apps and whatnot. But it was all about inking, and that the original Andromedas also had multiple cameras and was going to be all about 3D and mixed reality experiences as well. All of that sort of isn't there on Duo. It's definitely much more focused on the spanning stuff and Android and sort of just being a Gen 1 product. So there are some differences, but the overall core aspect of the product is the same. The screens are the same. I think the dimensions are pretty much the same as well. There are different sort of missing feature sets. Obviously, Andromeda was metal, Duo's glass. Andromeda had external cameras, Duo does not. But I think we could see some of that return perhaps in Duo 2 or Duo 3. So don't write those off as not ever coming. But there won't be a Windows version. That's never coming. I keep seeing people, I'm sure with Duo 2, they'll do a Windows version. Microsoft does not have a team that's working on Windows for phones in any way, unfortunately, that those projects are dead. People who are working on Windows are doing so from the perspective of making it a great PC OS and tablet OS, not a great phone OS. As far as I'm aware, Windows doesn't even include telephony anymore, so you can't even use it to make phone calls anyway. So don't be expecting a Windows 10X variant of the Duo 2 or whatever. It's just not going to happen. Microsoft has committed to Android for this product line, and they are sticking with it for as long as feasibly possible until the product fails.
Right. Yeah. I will say, and this is just a comment about, I talked about this during the podcast, how media seemed to be way more positive about this than the initial reception from the audience until people started watching Panos' video. I will say it's been interesting in the sense of Windows Central that in terms of traffic and comments on our articles and engagement, it's off the roof for Surface Duo. It's like the Windows Phone days. Even there's the people who are like, I'm not getting it. It's stupid. It's too expensive. It's going to fail, blah, 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 blah. They're definitely sharing their opinions all the time, which goes to tell me, there's being irrelevant, and then there's being kind of controversial or intriguing. Duo is in that latter category. It's definitely not irrelevant, which is probably a way worse scenario for this. If Duo came out or was announced and people just kind of shrugged, they weren't talking about it, that I would say is bad. The fact that people are talking about it, and the fact that people are already talking about it, and like, okay, the camera, the Qi, those are like I said, those are solvable problems. They can fix that technically later on with other versions. And the price thing is also kind of inconsequential too. They can lower the price, they can higher the price, they can do trade-ins, they can make it more worth the price. But I thought that was really interesting. We're seeing a lot of people talking about this, a lot of interest in it. And I predict this is what's going to be like for the next year. Very small percentage of us will get this device. We'll talk about it a lot. You're going to hear us gushing about it. You're going to see Zach and I gaming with our Xbox controller with it. We're going to be like, Zach going to be like, I just love this thing. And, it's going to be like that. And most of you will just have to watch from the sidelines with that weird kind of like, like, I'm curious. It's still too expensive. And then version 2 is going to come out. And a lot of people are going to be like, half percentage of that will be like, oh, now it's good. Some people still won't come around for the ride, but that's going to be the trajectory of this.
Zach, have you observed significant differences OS-wide in your testing of Windows 10X to what you've seen so far with the Duo, i.e. their implementation of Android versus 10X across the dual screens? So obviously there are key fundamental differences in how Windows 10X behaves compared to Android on the Surface Duo. They both have, I guess, a dock along the bottom, but on Windows 10X, the dock is much more like a taskbar, a more traditional Windows taskbar, whereas on the Duo, it's more of a sort of just shortcut area for launching apps. It doesn't show you your running apps like a taskbar does. Regarding spanning is almost identical. So you do the thing where you swipe and then you hold it to the center bezel and then it spans across both screens. Except on Duo, you do that, you swipe up from the bottom and drag to the center. On Windows 10X, you swipe down from the top and drag to the center. So again, there are key differences, but they are also very similar in a lot of ways. A lot of people were expecting the UIs to be very similar. I don't think they are. I think Windows 10X is very distinctly different from what runs on the Duo. But from, I guess, an iconography perspective, they are similar. So I can see why people assume that.
Speaking of Neo, that is not coming holiday season. They did change their wording finally on that, and that's put off indefinitely as they redouble their efforts on Windows as it is.
In your opinion, do you believe the Pixel Sense screen and the Android software development is a majority of the price? That definitely is part of it. I also think the unique, as Dan mentioned, all the different processors for the specific features, the fact that it's dual screens and they had to build a very special hinge for this device with wires that are less than a hair thick. All of that, it all goes into it, really. Like, I think a lot of people are assuming the hinge isn't that expensive. I think this might be one of Microsoft's most expensive hinges ever, because of what they have to carry data, right, as well. And yeah, I just think I think the hinge is a very big part of the price. Any ideas when reviewers will get their samples? So originally we were supposed to get a review sample this week, but there was a last-minute delay, which is also why the Duo is launching in September now instead of end of August. We are expecting to get one in the next couple of weeks. It could be late next week. It could be the week after. But Dan will be receiving one at some point. We'll do all the usual. We'll do an unboxing and our first impressions. Dan will do a written review and maybe even a video review. But if he doesn't do the video review, I will certainly do one when I get mine in September. By the way, Dan, the day it arrives, you're shipping out that same day. No sitting around, no waiting. Yes. I want it the same day. Thank you.
I understand. I have a feeling you and I will both be honest about the drawbacks about this device, but I also feel like we're not going to care. Like, I'm very excited about, first of all, I barely go out anymore with this pandemic. Right, so the idea of like the camera, I just went through my camera roll on the Ultra, which is a pretty good camera, 108 megapixel. They had like 5 photos in the last few days, and they weren't like keepers. They were just things I was quickly sending to someone as like, here, quick, look at this. It didn't even matter on the quality. But I'm really looking forward to, one, using the Kindle app as a reader, using it to play video games, responding to emails and Twitter from it. I think it's going to be, I'm pretty excited. It just, is the battery life good? That's going to be important. And what's it like opening it up and carrying it around, right? I think that's going to be the real kind of questions I have for it. But I don't know. I'm pretty excited about this. And it's clear, like I said, our audience is way more excited. There's something about phones. They're just way more personal than a laptop. Way more engagement on this stuff. So it's good. We're returning our roots. Windows Phone Central. We're going to be a phone site a little bit again. But I feel like you and I are going to be talking a lot about this for the next year.
If you guys aren't a fan of the Duo, stop listening to this podcast for the next year. Right. Do you think...
Well, hopefully
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, hopefully we'll be able to show you real world examples of why it's impressive, and what we like about it.
Do you think that the partnership with Google will give Microsoft access to the Pixel camera software? No, I do not.
Yeah.
The partnership between Microsoft and Google is the same as any partnership Google has with any Android OEM that ships to Play Store. There's nothing explicitly special going on here. Microsoft has built its own camera app and is using its own AI optimizations. We don't really know what that entails or how good that is because, again, we've not seen any camera samples yet. Obviously, that's one area we will dive into in our reviews and hands-on and whatnot. But as of right now, we don't really know too much.
Yeah, I believe the AI, and I say it in kind of quotes, I'm not expecting a ton. I think it's pretty basic. I think it was mostly done to solve an interesting issue, which is because it's got a single camera. Usually a smartphone has the front-facing camera, which is geared to be a selfie camera. And then you have the rear cameras, which are usually wider angle, meant for taking photos of the world. Duo has one camera that has to do both. And I think the AI is supposed to basically help with scene detection to adjust accordingly. So when you're doing a video call, it's going to be one way, and then when you do the real world, different. But I'm not expecting like Pixel AI here, but they could get there over time because that's a really easy way to solve the problem with the camera in terms of size in this device is through software. And so it'll be really fun to see if they can figure that out.
128 or 256, what's the feel out there? So I pre-ordered the 128 model, and the reason I was going to get the 256, but then I looked at the storage I've got on my Galaxy Fold. I've got 512 gigs. I'm only using 68 gigs of that, and I've had that since December. So I figured I'm going to be upgrading to the Duo 2 when that comes out.
There you go.
So 128 is fine. I'm not going to fill it in the year.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat here. Two things. If you're really considering buying this phone, you're in the Zach Dan league of like Surface fan, Microsoft fan, and you have the $1,400. It's not that big of a deal, right? If you're in that camp, I feel like when Duo 2 gets announced and you see how it fixes all the things wrong with Duo, you're going to go and buy that, right? And you're going to probably, and I assume they'll probably do a trade-in program. They're doing a trade-in program now, Samsung, Apple phones, and there's a couple others. But like if you trade in a Note 10 Plus, a certain size of it, you can get up to $700 back. It's kind of a pain. You have to buy the device, they send you the phone, and then you got to fill out the paper, do it online, and send it in. It's a bit of a process, but you will get $700 back. Same for an iPhone 11 Pro Max or an iPhone 11 Pro, you can get up to $700. So I imagine they would do the same thing for Duo 1, but we'll have to wait and see. But I think the year cadence here is probably going to hold true for you early adopters, in which case get to 128, unless you're one of those people that's like, I need 60 gigs of music wherever I go all the time. Like, all right.
Do you think Microsoft will be pressured by reviewers to put in an LED notification indicator on the outside of the Duo 2? I don't think so. I think LED notification lights are a thing of the past. I wouldn't say no to it, don't get me wrong. But I don't think we'll see that in Duo 2. There's way more innovative ways they could provide an outer indicator, if you will. But I don't think it'd be an LED light.
Yeah, I think it goes into it becomes a distraction. Right now, Panos is kind of set in this idea that when you close this device, it's closed.
Yeah, it's gone.
Yeah, it's gone. And so I feel like they're going to probably stick with that. And I feel like an LED is kind of garish on a device like this, but who knows? Microsoft will probably not release total unit sales. I'll actually go one step further and say they definitely won't release unit sales. But what would you guys think would be the total units sold? When do you think they'll stop sales in anticipation of a version 2 release in second quarter 21? This is a really tough question. I don't even know how many Surface Pros they've sold, even in the last quarter for Surface Pro 7. We really don't know. All Microsoft gives is a total Surface sales, hardware sales figure every quarter. And then we have to rely on them doing their conference calls for investors saying, we saw a high turnout for a Surface Pro and laptop, and you can kind of maybe figure something out there, but we really don't know. And I really can't put a number on how many. I don't know how many they will sell of Duo or how many they expect to sell. But Bader, said appropriately, low volume device. I don't think they're anticipating a lot. I think this is like HoloLens. I think it's like Surface Studio.
Yeah, I agree.
Where they're not going to sell a lot of these. So
Surface Pro X as well.
Yeah.
Zach, how are you getting one if it is a USA only release? Well, I put a lot of trust in Dan. I sent him $1,500 of my own dollars, and I said, Dan, buy me one and ship it to me. And he said, okay.
Yep.
And we'll see if he actually follows through.
Yeah,
take the money and run.
The pre-order is in.
Yeah. I don't know. It must have got lost when I sent it. Sorry.
Yeah.
So is there any differences between the 128 and 256 other than the storage? As far as we're aware, no. It would be weird to have a difference between them. It is, as far as I'm aware, only storage. So interesting. I do want to briefly talk about, I know the podcast is over, but oh well. Briefly talk about the differences in what we were talking about before the specs were official and what are the actual official specs. So let me pull up where is it? Here we go. So there are some minor differences, which I think are really interesting. So we were bang on the money with the display and the processor, the RAM. We were a bit off of the storage. I was hearing a 64 gig variant was going to be there. That never turned out to be the case. And although I don't think I said this publicly, I was hearing that it was UFS 2.1 storage. Turns out it was UFS 3.0 storage. The camera, we were 99% correct on that, except the UM. What's the UM measurement? Is that pixel size?
Yeah, pixel size.
So we were hearing the pixel size was 1.12. Whereas the actual shipping variant has 1.0, so it's actually technically worse on the retail unit. And we also heard the battery was 3,462 milliamp hours, or 460, I think I reported. At the time, I was hearing 462, but I just didn't want any of my sources to be caught out, so I changed it slightly. But that's technically right. That's just the smallest battery, the biggest battery in the unit, because the battery's split in two. One of the battery sizes is 3,462. The other one is whatever the equivalent is to add up to 3,577. So I honestly, I think we did pretty well on all things considered. We were mostly there. Just a couple of things we were off by, including the release date or the release week. But again, it's not my fault. We were right up until Microsoft changed it at the very last second.
But will a UK carrier support it? Yeah, this is global bans. We posted the bans up on that FAQ. In fact, I'll repost the FAQ here again. But you can go check out the bans.
Yeah, that was the big thing I was waiting for. When I was saying to Dan, I probably won't get one, I was assuming that it would have US-only bans, because even if I could get one shipped to me, if it doesn't have the bans for UK carriers, what's the point in getting one? But luckily, the Unlocked model in the US does have bans for my UK carrier, which is O2. It has bands 1, 3, and 20, I think is what O2 uses. So I should be able to use one with no issue. We'll see if that's the case.
Oh, I ordered you the AT&T model.
Yeah. Dan, no. Friends don't let friends buy AT&T models.
If you want visual, I'm on AT&T. If I want visual voicemail, I kind of want that one actually. So.
Do you actually use visual? Do people leave you voicemails these days?
I mean, that is a point, right? I actually, yeah.
If no one answers the phone, I never leave a voice. I just hang up. Like, all right, fine, I won't talk to you. You don't deserve my voice in a message.
You're right in the sense I barely get any voicemails. That said, on the occasion I do appreciate having visual voicemail. And I like Wi-Fi calling, which again, I'm not making a lot of phone calls, but it's cool to make up for having a lousy signal.
Didn't they certify it for Japan and Canada already? Why then the US only approach? How big are the chances for a European release? Again, it's to control stock initially. They don't want to make too many and sell too few. They can make a small amount for the US only. If they sell incredibly well, then they can start building more for other markets. It's EU certified as well, as far as I'm aware. It's just that, again, Microsoft is doing this very slow rollout approach. As far as I'm aware, we won't be seeing it in other markets until next year. That could change. I've only heard, that's not concrete information, but I have heard whispers that will be the case. But that could change. Don't quote me on that as of now.
Yeah, just to expand upon that. Yeah, I mean, this is also a really new device, right? They don't know. They've dog-fooded it, but now we got to get into people's hands. And anytime you release something new, especially with the new operating system, like you don't know, there could be bugs, there could be issues. They want to work things out. They got to get app updates going and OS updates going. Like they got to get this juggernaut kind of rolling, right? You don't want to do a global release or even in multiple markets. And you don't want to, and they also have to make sure manufacturing is keeping up with the quality control because this is all brand new stuff. So they want to start off slow and ramp up. I think it's totally legitimate. I get it. It sucks if you really want this device and you're not in the US. Totally understand. But listen, if we want a Duo 2, they got to be cautious here in how they're going to approach this. Panos is not going to go down in history as losing another hundreds of millions of dollars on this phone. If it doesn't sell well, he's just going to take it very slow and go from there. Someone's saying visual voicemail works on unlocked phones. Listen, I'm talking about AT&T in the United States. I'm telling you, AT&T in the US, it does require specific AT&T branded phones in order to get visual voicemail and Wi-Fi calling working. T-Mobile is a little bit better on this. I have the unlocked Ultra here. I threw in a T-Mobile visual voicemail app and it worked fine, but that's not AT&T. I'm telling you, AT&T is different. So I'll work on your carrier probably, but in the US, well, we're weird here.
Yeah, and of course, if you really, really want one, you can import one. You'll have to find someone who lives in the States to actually take it in for you. Because I originally tried to pay for it myself using my account and just Dan's address, and that didn't work. It does have to be a US account in the US to place the order. So find someone you trust in the US and they should be able to take one in and then ship it to you. You'll have to likely pay import charges, taxes, which will, I guess, cost a pretty penny as well. We'll see how bad it is for me. But not only that, like there is risk of importing a phone from another country because one, if something goes wrong with it, you're stuck. There's no service for you. So if I receive a Duo and it has a defect out of the box, I probably could get it sent back, but I'd have to send it back to Dan, and it'd take a while. But these are the risks you take with importing. But you can import one, and it should work on your network. So,
that's how I had to do Huawei phones. I bought a couple of those, and
so fingers crossed my unit is fine.
Yes. Daniel, do you use T-Mobile? You mentioned Wi-Fi calling. I use all three major carriers, actually four. I have Sprint on an always connected PC because I got the $15 deal per month, which is awesome. My main line is AT&T, but I do have T-Mobile and I do have Verizon too. It's expensive. Although the T-Mobile I'm using here was like a dummy card that they gave me with to test this phone out. But yeah, I mean, T-Mobile is the best deal you can get on a cellular provider. AT&T and Verizon are stupid expensive, but better coverage, I would argue. There are a few companies who support 3 years. I'm pretty sure Samsung started that recently. Yeah, so Samsung announced about 2 weeks ago, not even, that high-end flagship phones going forward that were recently announced will get 3 years of updates. But they are the only ones besides Microsoft and, of course, Google Pixel who are doing that. I'm sure we'll see other companies jump on board. But yeah, companies like LG and Sony and Motorola have a really terrible history of OS updates. So it'll be interesting to see. OnePlus supports 3 years. Yeah, although sometimes they delay them. They're not. Android Police did a good roundup of all the carriers. OnePlus has been pretty good, but they also sometimes delay them by 20 to 30 days. So,
when trading in a phone, in this case, what will Microsoft do with the traded phones? They'll flash Windows Phone on them and laugh.
Yes.
I don't
No,
know,
it's
honestly.
based on resale value. And no, they don't take Windows phones because there's no resale value on those. But it works simply in the sense that, like, if you have a Samsung Galaxy S10 Plus, a pretty recent flagship phone, $700 is actually a really good deal. It's actually more than what Samsung
Yeah.
offers, which is 650. And same with the iPhone. But iPhones have very good resale value. It's one thing people always talk about with Apple is the fact that you can hold on to their devices for longer and still get a high price. But if you want to do like LG, if you want to do OnePlus, if you want to do a Sony, the price what you're going to get drops down significantly. And the older the phone is, the harder it is to do anything with. Some of these will be resold. Some will be scrapped for parts to be used for to fixing phones, repurposed and stuff like that. So,
Does it come with Android 11? It does not. It'll be shipping with Android 10, and we'll get an update to Android 11 hopefully later this year. Microsoft hasn't commented on the cadence in which these big updates will show up for Duo. But I think Panos said in the briefing, in the media sort of bit that wasn't uploaded to YouTube, that they'll obviously curate these updates. They'll make sure they fit in line with what Microsoft is trying to do on Duo, and then they'll ship them out, which I assume will take a little while. I don't think that's a few day process, but we'll have to see. I know they are working on the Android 11 update as we speak. I don't think it's in wide testing yet internally, but it's definitely being worked on. Right, a couple more questions, and I think it's time to head off. Can we run different launchers on the Duo? You can run anything on the Duo. Anything that runs on Android should run on the Duo. Whether or not it runs well is another story. When I tried a couple launchers in the emulator, a lot of them just didn't work, or they tried to force the device in to portrait mode, so the screens were above and below rather than left and right. If the launcher doesn't support dual screens, you're going to have a bad experience. So I saw a few people saying, "Oh, I'm going to install Launcher 10 or Square Home." Good luck. If the developer hasn't built support for dual screens, you're not going to have a great experience. And that's no fault of the Duo itself. That's entirely on the developers. So, will they accept paying with organs? I don't think so. Do you think the software updates for the Duo will be sooner than other OEMs? We don't know. They didn't tell us either when we asked. They were like, yeah, we're going to be updating it, but they didn't give us a cadence for how often that will be. Go on.
I was going to say, due to probably the small amount of people buying this initially, and the fact that they're new at it, I would expect some delays. Like, I would not be surprised if these updates come, 20, 30 days later or even longer. The 11 update comes a bit later. I think it's going to take them a little while to get their system down and have all their checks in place. And they'll speed up accordingly, just like other OEMs have in the past. But I wouldn't be surprised that they're a little bit slower. They do have a lot of kind of customization going on here. I wouldn't say it's quite as, crazy as what LG and Samsung kind of do, but it seems like it's probably pretty, a lot of stuff.
Zach, thoughts on the Series X launching without Halo Infinite ready? Very sad. I was looking forward to Infinite. We'll talk about it more next week's podcast, but I mean, it kind of leaves the Series X without a launch title, right? So that's going to be interesting and not very good, in my opinion.
Would I be able to have a T-Mobile eSIM and then put a normal AT&T chip? If you bought the unlocked version, yeah, you should be able to. I mean, that's the whole kind of point of eSIM. eSIM is supposed to be like your alternative. I mean, it doesn't have to be alternative. It could be your main. You could have your eSIM as your main phone line, and then you go to another country and you pick up a physical SIM and drop it in, and you switch between them. That's how I've used it in the past. You can also have that reversed. You can have your main physical SIM, and you go to another country and you switch to an eSIM from a different carrier. But that should all be, that's kind of literally the point of having these kind of things. So that should be doable here, but we'll have to find out. It shouldn't be no technical limitation though to that. Where to get recovery images? I mean, it's way too early to talk about that. So
what was the question?
About recovery images.
That's a good question. I assume it will use the Windows I guess, is it the Microsoft device recovery tool now? I think it might be.
Yeah.
There is a recovery tool on the Microsoft Store that uses, for HoloLens, I assume they'll use the same client. All right, I think that might be enough for today. Thank you for tuning in. We'll be back next Friday, as per usual. Talking probably more about the Duo if we have one in hand by then, but also all the other stuff we missed this week and whatever happens next week as well. But until then, we will see you next week. Bye.
Bye.